Hey, U.S. history students, wanted to touch base a little bit about what warfare looks like in World War One. So, really, the bulk of it settles into trench warfare. And if you look at the bottom left picture down here, the trenches would consist of a number of different lines of trenches with these connecting trenches running between them. Over here would be the other enemy, kind of off the screen here, and the middle between those two trenches is known as no man's land, right? Because no man wants to be there, or no man is alive there very long. It's described often as the crater of the moon, right, with these different holes and stuff involved. You can see some of the barbed wire and other abstractions and things to try to keep people from getting into the trenches. And so this really will be what World War One warfare centers around. How do you get out of your trench, take the enemy trench without getting everyone killed? Okay, and we'll figure out that there's one weapon in particular that has really changed warfare from last major wars, if you think of U.S. history, like the U.S. Civil War, etc. So, first, the picture on the bottom right, just to get a term, kind of a phrase out of the way, when you would leave your trench and go attack another one, that was known as going over the top for obvious reasons. Usually, you would blow a whistle or something, right, to communicate to everyone down the trench line it's time to get out and go attack. And this really is a suicide mission for the most part. And really, people are trying to come up with different ways to figure out how do we get across no man's land. Is it bullet stopping armor? That's super heavy here. This, I don't even know what this is. Iron mesh netting in front of your face to try to prevent shrapnel, but you can't see where you're going. Eventually, tanks, which we'll talk about in here, will help solve this problem. But really, what's making it so difficult um, is the machine guns, right? If you think back to the Civil War, at the end of that war in the 1860s, we have people fighting in trenches, except they would actually be successful sometimes in taking the enemy trench because the enemy could only fire 3 shots a minute, right? You'd have to put the bullet down. Then you'd have to take your ramrod and ram the bullet down to the bottom of the barrel. Then your primer cap, ready, aim, fire, right? So you can fire 2, 3 shots a minute. Machine guns have made it so you can spray the battlefield with 400 to 500 shots a minute. And so it's changed significantly the technology. The tactics haven't, and the results is tens of millions of people killed in World War One and very little movement on the battlefield. Some other technologies, poison gas, going to be introduced during the First World War. Quite unreliable because it's reliant on the wind direction, etc. And so it's not always going where it's intended to go. Eventually, armored tanks will help answer the question of the machine gun, trench warfare, and no man's land. There's a clip in Schoology. I want you to watch the first 10 minutes of it. These are extremely slow moving, 3 to 4 miles an hour. They're not quite like the tanks you think of today in terms of their capabilities, but the premise is still really the same. Uh, we'll also get aircraft, right, that you see in the bottom left, usually used for reconnaissance or kind of spying and looking to see what the enemy has behind their lines. Eventually, we'll develop technology, will get better as the war goes on, just like with anything. And they'll be able to hold more weight and more bombs and things, and planes can start to deliver bombs to targets. We've talked about submarines. They've become much more reliable. The Germans rely heavily on submarines and U-boats. And so, really, those are 5 big innovations. There are others, but poison gas, machine guns probably the most impactful, right? Because it causes the problem of trench warfare and no man's land, and how do you get across from point A to point B without all dying? Armored tanks, and then aircraft and submarines. We'll talk a little bit more about trench warfare and what it does to people kind of mentally and what it was like, because it's a really negative kind of warfare type of fighting. And all fighting obviously has its negatives, but this one in particular, World War One, really does. So we'll touch base on that next time. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.